And I looked at it in a very, very skeptical way because it was just the commitment that they made to the rabbi, not the commitment they made to themselves. And that was the beginning of the first discussion we had with the entire community. Not that we had with that we didn't have with the community. It was that discussion at that particular time. Of course, it followed there that for years later, many years later, how many years? 40 years, 50 years later, it became a very popular state of affairs for the whole community. But we didn't have anybody to do it with. But from there, we did begin to build the first McVeigh in Brooklyn. We built the first McVeigh in Deal, New Jersey, um, which must have been about, I can't remember now, 45 or 50 years ago was the first McVeigh. Started Deal, but finished in New York. It started in Deal because a year after we decided that we were going to do, we started to do it. We were halfway through, but we couldn't finish because we didn't have either the money or either the money or otherwise. But we started when we went back to Brooklyn after we went to Deal that particular summer. When we went back to Brooklyn, the rabbis of the community said together, how could you build a mikveh in Brooklyn? How could you build a mikveh in Deal and not build in Brooklyn? You must build in Brooklyn first as people, large crowd and so on and so forth. And we committed to do both. But we did, as it ended up, by nature, it was lucky or unlucky, but it was circumstantial that we finished the mikveh in Brooklyn 6 months before we finished the mikveh Deal. But we did build both of them, and the community supported, as it turned out, although they didn't have the full sophisticated background. They completed the mikveh and they built both, but the one that was completed in Brooklyn before was completed in Deal. But just circumstantial. But that was the beginning. And I tell you that the community, just to give you background on the community, in Deal, in Deal, we had a much smaller community than they had in Brooklyn, but we were very sincere in all areas. The communities were sincere in their commitment to undertake almost all projects that they said they were going to do, that they wanted to do, that the community encouraged them to do. They participated in all of them. That's the nature, is how serious the community is about their projects, how wonderful they are, and how sincere they are. And it's always been, and they were always financially supportive and otherwise in every respect, tremendous people.
Really something. The first part I didn't do on the YouTube, so what's on Zoom does not save, or I should save.
Probably not, but we have it saved.
We have it
We
saved.
remember.
Right.
We're gonna remember.
Mr. Haber, we didn't, I didn't put it on the computer. I mean, I didn't save it by accident. You spoke, could you just mention about Mr. Saffer again, about that day, the groundbreaking ceremony?
The groundbreaking ceremony for the McVeigh. McVeigh was the 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 location was on East. I said I think it was East 9th Street and Avenue S, something like that. And you wanted to know what the background that particular day. We had the community was invited. Everybody was invited naturally, and some not the whole world attended, but enough people attended.
Come here, we're here.
Right, everybody was invited.
Everybody was invited, and he was a glowing personality. Edwin Safford was a famous man at the time. We had a lot of famous people there.
If you want to join, Kevin, we're hearing about the building of the first Sephardi mikveh. If you want to sit right over here, Kevin.
We had
Dr. Rosen.
hi, Dr. Rosen. My many hate him. Okay, that's it. I'm sorry to bother you. That's okay.
Morning, good
morning. Good morning. So who was there? Everybody, the chief rabbi of the community, chief rabbi of our community was there. And the truth of the matter is, when we built the mikveh, that first mikveh, which was very impressive, the we had a meeting together, a small group of people that we had, not small, but not enormous, and maybe 5 private people, and every rabbi in the community attended the meeting. We had it every 2 or 3 weeks in our private homes, just a few of us. And we started to talk about the nature of building the mikveh, the responsibilities, the undertaking, and so on and so forth. That particular made a tremendous impression on me that every rabbi in the community was invited to that meeting, and everybody in the community attended that meeting. Every rabbi attended. That's how sincere they were about it. And yeah, I remember having the discussions with background discussions, almost everybody. And it made an impression on me that although we had great rabbis in the community, the chief rabbi was Rabbi Kassim, who, God bless him, was he was quite mature and quite old. But I remember going around the crowd and asking for opinions on different things. And I always felt that he was the most refined person. Not that he was probably any different than anybody else, but he had such a bright mind that every time it came up and there was a debate between rabbis, I remember that almost the last one to be called on was him, and he always had the very, very refined personality about everything. That was also very impressionable. But they were the one subject that we had was how the mikveh had to be built, and it was committed to by everybody that we would build it as refined in as refined an advanced way physically as we could, and expensively. Not that it had to be expensive, but it had to be up to very high standard. When we finished the mikveh, it was magnificent, and it still is. I don't know if I haven't been there in 40 years, but for 50 years. But at the time, it was known that if you had a beautiful home, that you lived in a beautiful home, the mikveh had to be as beautiful as that, if not bigger. And it helped. That helped. It enhanced the background and the participation of all the women in the mikveh, because it was special. The mikveh ought, by the fact that it was early on and at the time, and everybody wasn't so familiar with it and participating in it so much. We said that when we built, if it took us an extra 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 2 months, 3 months, it had to be perfect. Every background had to be perfect. Every private part of it had to come out perfect, and did. And now, Baruch Hashem, I think all the mikveh that we build in almost everywhere is of a very high nature, so that no woman could say, I don't go to the mikveh because it's not clean, it's not this, it's not that. That was never the case.
I wonder if that set the standard for the world. I mean, now today we do find, many the mikvahs in general are being built so beautiful. I wonder if that idea was created the standard. I don't know what was that back then.
I don't know if it necessarily created it. It's not so mikveh order or every day everybody goes to mikveh, but it was our standard. I know the few people that I worked with made sure that it had that standard, and it was perfect. And I think it should be. Why not?
Really beautiful. Just for the audience, because we didn't save it before, just a little bit of background about some of the great people in the community that were there at the day of that groundbreaking. You said Edmund Saffer was there. Remember any other people that come to mind? I mean, because you had a special story, a personal story with Edmund Saffer that day.
It was a story that I conveyed to you. Who was there? I don't remember exactly the names, but they were the president of the, not president, where were they? Who were they? Who were they? Who were the dignitaries of that ran the city? Were they
Meaning the mayor or these type of
mayor?
politicians, they were there.
All
All
the,
important people were there.
all the proper people were there. All the politicians were there. We were more interested in, not that we're down on politicians, but we were more anxious to see that all the people were there, all the community members were there, all the rabbis were there. So we built to a good standard, a very high standard, I think, at the time, and always have. And that helped us, that helped a lot.
So just so people could hear a little, the story with, you saw him sweat, when Edwin was sweating. It was 94, you said it was 95 degrees such a day? And,
And he was dressed nicer than we are today. He was just
in a full suit?
full suit, full everything. He was classy, always a classy
And
man.
you saw that he was sweating.
I saw that he was sweating. He was dripping. But
Wow.
that was the nature. It was Sunday was 11 o'clock in the morning. We were everybody was fully dressed, and he was when I asked him, as I told you, when I asked him if he wants something to drink, because he said no, thank you. When I have my Yortzeit, I don't, I fast the whole day. It wasn't it wasn't bragging about it. It was just the nature. It was his nature, and he was like that since he's associated with, and he's the founder of the synagogue here. We came to know one another well, and his nature was such that he was always very, very delicate and very sincere about all his private and public things. And to know a person that had such a high standard in his businesses and his background, etc., to know that he was that way, and everything was interesting to know. He had other things too. He was very refined in his eating habits. He was very refined in his dress habits, and it was very fine in his sophistication, his etiquette, etc. He was a special man. Passed away very young, as many of you know, if you read the books about Edmund Safra.
You've told me, Mr. Haber, that two of the greatest accomplishments of the community were the mikveh and the edict. If I recall correctly, you have told me that. Could you just elaborate a little bit more on the edict? Because not everyone understands it the way they should understand and appreciate it, the way they should appreciate it, especially the new generation. I'm concerned that not have the appreciation, understanding about the edict that, regarding the converts, that the community.
I think I mentioned to you, and I think you remember that the one wonders about how the community was so blessed about so many different things. And I felt that there were two things that the community participated in that were unique. One of them had to do with the
Mikveh?
mikveh, and another had to do with
The edict.
the edict. What was the edict again? Remind me.
Remember the edict where the rabbi said that they were very concerned.
Oh, the rabbis were very concerned about the
of
possibility
intermarriage.
of intermarriage. And they made a decree on many occasions. I think, if I would just speculate now, it must have been, that same edict must have been issued over a period of time 12 or 14 times. Periodically, every 4, 5, or 6 years, they'd come up with a review of the same edict, and that was to disallow any intermarriages to take place. Although intermarriage by law is not a requirement, not putting not allowing that to happen.
You mean to say Conversion, right? Intermarriage is forbidden. I mean, even though conversion, the Torah allows conversion, but they said we can't allow it in the community. That's what you meant.
And
Am I
never,
correct?
and never did, once or
I think there
twice.
was a proclamation. There was a proclamation in the shul about that.
Right, right. They call it
marriage from the community of the.
no, no, it's
No.
not intermarriage. It's conversion. But
Conversion.
the community doesn't accept. We have an Ashkenaz person right here, so we're gonna update Dr. Rosen.
Another.
Yeah, okay, but there's
They
right.
don't allow intermarriage.
Conversion.
I'm sorry, they don't allow conversion, regardless of what circumstances there were that allowed for it. But the community did not. And one doesn't know when they start a project, which is natural. One doesn't know whether or not it should be endorsed, it should be endorsed, circumstances would change and so on and so forth. And most of the times, projects are not necessarily followed exactly the way in the second case as the first case and so on and so forth. But in the communities from the inception, which took place in 1930 or 32 or 33, with maybe two of the rabbis or three of the rabbis of the community that didn't all live in New York. They could have lived in Israel. They could have lived in anywhere it was. The rabbis endorsed this doctrine, didn't allow for conversion, and as a result of that, the possibility that the average guy in the street who sees a beautiful girl and will allow conversion to take place with her, and it's not that nature was perfectly acceptable, but not for the community, and that saved us. I'm sure that saved us. It has. You see that?
They say the proof is in the pudding, right?
In the pudding. It's true.
Ashkenazim are suffering from intermarriage.
I'm sure they are.
Big time.
I'm sure they are. Well, how much are we suffering? I don't think much.
Oh, thank God, thank God.
I don't think much. You can't get it pulled off. You can't get it pulled off. As hard as somebody would try to, then they don't even work on it. It's not something that breaks down and breaks down, and it could break down in another city. It could be Detroit, or could be Chicago, but even that doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen in the community. And I think it's clear to many of us that was the gift. That was the ultimate gift. Well, what higher gift could there be?
It's really beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
And what do you think regarding Shabbat in the community? Thank God the community has grown tremendous in the observance of Shabbat. What would you think was a big help to make that happen?
I think carrying on Shabbat is a big doctrine, and I think we've been very fastidious about that in the community, and not allowing it to take place so easily, even when there's allowances under certain circumstances and in certain ways for that to take place. I think the community as such is very, very fastidious about keeping Shabbat in many ways, and all the other guidelines that we have place are strong. And that's been a tremendous saving for the growth and the continuity. And now I think the growth in the last number of years, everything has grown. I think I may have said recently, not recently, but in the last couple of years, that I think personally that the great achievement in the community in the last recent 7 years, 10 years, 15 years has been the fact that women have outperformed, as great as men are, women's performance in the last number of years has been spectacular. The sincerity in that in regard to many laws that when they hear something that they didn't even learn, they didn't come to the classes because they were not we weren't brought up that way. But as women learn laws, they adhere to the laws and the doctrines in a very fastidious way. And I think that's another big factor. You see that to be true, Rabbi?
100%.
Unusual. Unusual.
If they don't have the support of the women, the men will not be able to.
They wouldn't have it.
Right.
They wouldn't have it. But they do. And they're very sincere about it. They're very, very, very sincere about it. What happens was if a woman learned a law and she came home and the next day after she learned the law, she saw that her husband was doing something that was a little contrary to what she learned. She said, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you doing that?" And he said, "But don't tell me. I heard today you're not allowed to do it. We're not doing it." They stopped everything. They stopped everybody, all the women, all the men in the track, and beautiful to see. And they could get the support. They could get the women can do anything, and should, and they do, and they're the back watch of well, many of the laws. Not that the men are not perfect too, but that I found that unusual because they didn't have the sophistication, the background.
Amazing.
Yes.
I mean, we find in the merit of the righteous women we were redeemed from Egypt. They play the story of Hanukkah. They play a role. Purim. They play a role. Egypt. They constantly the women are highlighted. Their impact on Judaism, on Jewish community is unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Maybe, yes, Mr. Haber, one of the big things, everybody knows about the Shari Torah, the amazing yeshiva that you founded with your brother. You want to give us a little background? Why? What inspired you to want to build that yeshiva?
Shari Torah.
With your brother, together with your brother.
Against all odds. Shari Torah. Well, the community as such was primarily the education was at a different level. Wasn't the way we wanted to practice everything. And I remember when I was growing up, we had a very small crowd of men that went to yeshivas. We went to school, but we didn't go to yeshiva. And my brother, Rabbi Haber, who's an extraordinary person, went to visit Israel.
He was studying in Israel. Your brother was studying in Israel. I understand.
He went to Israel for a visit. My father was my mother had passed away. My father was he had a cerebral stroke in visiting Japan in the early years, 1960s, something like that, 1950s, 1960s. And he had a stroke and he wanted to, in the next year, he wanted to visit Israel. And he was able to persuade my brother to take him. which is not an easy thing for him to do. My brother took him to, and they went to study in Israel, what was supposed to be a visit for 3 or 4 weeks. And I think my brother told my father in the early years that he, instead of going back to my brother, instead of going back to, to America, he wanted to stay in Israel. Instead of staying for 3 or 4 weeks, he stayed for, I think, 14 years. And during that time, he became an accomplished,
Great Torah scholar.
accomplished in many respects. And I remember him, I remember him, they had visits in Israel. A lot of people that were visiting Israel went there and stayed there for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever. And in the early days, at that time, I remember Hacham Yehuda Adis. You know him, right? Rabbi Adis, very the great person. Rabbi Haber was studying on a regular basis. They were Bruta, learned Habruta on a daily basis, on a regular basis. And the rabbi saw, this Rabbi Adis saw in the school that he had, that the capacity, potential of the Syrian, some of the Syrian scholars who weren't scholars at the time, they were just in regular school, but they had a motivation. He saw that being accomplished, and he mentioned it to the Rabbi Haber, who was his friend and whatever, and he told him, and Rabbi Haber said he saw the potential in these Syrian boys that he couldn't believe was so established, so accomplishable. And when he had a chance, he came to New York on a few occasions and said, "I think if we build a school, it can work, and it will be accomplishable." So in, I think, 1982, he began the school Sharia Torah with I think we had 9 boys when we first started. That was a famous number because there were a number of institutions, Ashkenaz especially, that were capable of high levels. And Rabbi Haber opened up Sharia Torah with these 9 boys, and many of them, if not most of them, became the founders of schools that we have in the community, almost completely. Some great people, but there are a lot of great people. But we had tremendous achievement and luck and motivation that was probably unique and became unique. So we now accomplished a lot. We don't go to public schools anymore. We go to private schools. We go to yeshivot and the likes of everything, and at our mercy.
I think you once told me a beautiful story regarding Rabbi Haber and the teachers, the type of teachers that have to be in the school, even in the kindergarten. You had told me certain teachers about them wearing the hair covering. I think you told me a story about how he felt that the teachers in kindergarten and pre-1A have to be our role models.
We have a good memory, and I'm glad I remember some of the things that we talked about.
You want to say that story? I think it's a very interesting, beautiful story.
I think that the rabbi had a commitment himself. This is to himself
On our own.
to ensure that the women teachers at the time um, have the habit of covering their
Yeah.
hair. And when that habit, that subject, um, which became a subject that Rabbi Haber required in his, he required that the women cover their hair that are teaching in the schools. And it became a subject of discussion as to why is it important when you're talking about a young girl and you're talking about covering her hair. What's the difference?
With young children, the kids in the class, right?
We didn't have any older people. We didn't have any people that would be subject to being disputed for that. But people, a lot of people became aware that the rabbi was needed the covering of the hair in order to become a teacher in school. He required it, and we came later on to not later on, but gradually it became a subject that was well known and well required for him, and that's probably the reason for I think a lot of perfect behavior on the part of women.
And I think when you told me the story, maybe I think you told me that you had asked them. I think you had asked them, Rabbi Haber, or maybe you heard why is it necessary? That if I recall correctly, why is it necessary for these teachers for teaching young kids? Why? And I think you had told me because he felt the teacher is a role model for the kids. That's what I recall you telling me once upon a time, that the kids need to have right role models. And that therefore, if they see that the teachers have the hair covered, that will be a very big impression on them. I think that's what you told me once.
It was definitely a factor and definitely a subject that I now recall was a requirement, has been a requirement. The rabbi had as great rabbis normally do. They had certain principles that not once, but always carry through and never clearly understood the reasons for it taking place or being transpired. But later on, it became clear why these women and in other things had to behave a certain way, and that has been one of probably the great background for what the Sharia Torah, which is quite a good school, became and has been.
Thank you very much, Mr. Haber. It was really a great honor today to have this little interview with you without any preparation, Mr. Haber. I mean, it's not like you were notified you got the questions beforehand and teleprompting like what goes on in politics today. Okay. Our interview comes the day after Donald Trump accepted his nomination.
It was too late.
It was very late.
Yeah.
10 o'clock.
I saw this morning that it went on for almost an hour and
It's
a half.
12 o'clock.
I wasn't even too close.
Okay, I want to wish everyone a
Thank you
beautiful
very
day.
much.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you for being on, Ralph.
Shabbat shalom, Rabbi.
You heard some-
That was nice diversion.
Wasn't that amazing, Ralph? You need to share with your family, your kids, your grandchildren, what you heard today. It's important for them to know about all the things that what we have today didn't happen by itself. A lot of hard work. Okay, have a great day.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. You too. You too. Yes, be careful with the briefcase. Yes. Welcome. Welcome. Me too. Hey, if you don't mind, I'm going to- Phone number 2.